Playing a Zelda game, there are a few things I expect to be in every single iteration. Of course, you're gonna have your dungeons, your bosses, your items, your slew of collectibles, but you can't make a Zelda game without some minigames. Now, you see, I've never been to a carnival, but minigames are pretty much my best guess as to what that experience would be like. You perform some sort of physical act in order to get a big old cuddly teddy bear, or in our case, a piece of heart. Minigames usually bring out the extremes of a game. They can either be the easiest part, or the hardest. Whichever difficulty it is, you can usually expect a good old time. When playing Ocarina of Time, you might have happened upon a river, and in that river you might have found a log, and near that log you might have found a frog. Or a couple. These frogs aren't just regular frogs though, they're musical frogs, and playing one of the 6 Gray scale songs will make one of the frogs evolve. Play all the Gray songs, and congratulations, you now have a set of Greninja all ready to take on the Elite Four. Or you can play a song minigame with them. This minigame is simple. The frogs want you to make them jump to eat a butterfly, with each note being assigned to a different frog. This minigame isn't very hard. It does get quite difficult towards the last few butterflies, but if you have sharp reflexes, a good memory, or the ability to look up the song on the internet, this minigame shouldn't give you any troubles. I've just always liked the sense of completion this minigame has, since you can't access it the first time you come to Zora's River. Sure, you can play a few songs and make some of the frogs bigger, but you need to keep coming back after you get a new song. After making all the frogs bigger, I thought that was the end of it. That was it. That was all you had to do. But it turns out that they wanted to throw another hidden minigame after that. There are quite a few methods of travel in Majora's Mask. You can choose to walk with Link, teleport with Ocarina, or even ride Epona. Besides teleporting, the best method of travel is definitely the Goron Roll. The Goron Roll is a mechanic that turns Link's slowest form into the fastest. It's a mechanic that really defines the Goron. So, in standard Zelda fashion, they made a minigame out of it. The Goron Race is just that, a race between Gorons. It only happens in the spring, and you can't even get to it unless you blow up the entrance with a powder keg. The racetrack is lined with all sorts of obstacles, such as bomb flowers, trees, and, of course, all the other Gorons. Seriously, this race is ridiculous. Despite the obvious death trap that is Goron Link, all the other Gorons seem to have no problem bumping into you, and they'll do it continuously. However, this also means you can do it back to them, and man, does that feel satisfying. Most of the difficulty in this minigame stems from either the Gorons pushing you off the cliffs, or the ridiculous rubber band physics. Winning is more luck-based than anything else, which kinda sucks, but I really just love how intense the race feels due to the constant back and forth slamming between all the Gorons. I'm always a sucker for snowboarding type minigames, and the sledding in Twilight Princess is one of my favorites. You spend a lengthy time climbing up this brutal mountain called Snow Peak, and when you finally get to the top, you meet a Yeti named Yeto. Yeto offers to show Link the way to his house, which is the dungeon for this area, and despite the obvious lack of inspiration in his name, Yeto suggests a rather entertaining way to get there, which, as we know, is sledding. Despite it being a minigame, sledding down Snow Peak is incredibly atmospheric. It seems like it's the middle of the night and all you can hear is the sounds of Yeto and Link drifting in the freshly powdered snow. After the brutal climb up the mountain, sledding down is such a relaxing break that it really feels like you're cooling off along with Link. That is, until you try to show off and take the shortcuts, but end up falling to your doom. Several times in a row. The star minigame is a very nice contrast to the rest of Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess is a dark game in more ways than one. The story might not be as dark as Majora's Mask, but it definitely earns that gritty T for teens rating. Another way that Twilight Princess is dark is that the lighting seems to have its switch set down to dim. However, the star minigame puts Link into a cage with a whole bunch of bright glowy magic orbs just floating around. The goal is to use the claw shot to shoot your way across the cage and grab as many orbs as possible. It's a simple game, but it has a ton of enjoyment packed in. It gets even better when you get the double claw shots and can come back to the minigame for a round that brings out your inner Spider-Man. The orbs are set up in the same way every time, and they're set up so that it's pretty clear where a good direction to take is. I also love how after you beat the game, there's a group of girls outside who scream when they see Link, spew some hearts, and then run away all while squealing like the fangirls they are. They're probably the only NPCs in the franchise that have the proper reaction to seeing Link in person. Have you ever been playing a Zelda game and just thought, man, I would really like to go back to my dead-end job and sit at a desk for 8 hours? No? Well, too bad. We're gonna put a mailman's job as a minigame into your oh-so-treasured Zelda and force you to work anyways. But wait, it's actually fun? Yeah, I'm not sure what Nintendo was thinking when they put a mail sorting minigame into Wind Waker, but I can't really knock them for it. This is a top 10 favorite list after all. This minigame is as simple as it gets. You sort letters into boxes with a symbol that matches whatever symbol is on the letter. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not entirely sure why I like this minigame so much. Maybe it's the speed aspect, maybe it's the replayability with the high scores, maybe it's the color coding, but whatever it is, I'd much rather be sorting these digital letters than any real ones, that's for sure. So, I'm gonna kinda break the rules for this one. It's kind of two minigames. See, our boy Salvatore here appears in two places during Wind Waker. The first is on Windfall Island, and the second is on Spectacle Isle. I've decided to pair both the minigames together and just call this spot the Salvatore Games. First, we have Sinking Ships. This minigame is a reference to Battleship, but with limited shots and giant Octoroks. The second game is Barrel Shoot. This one has Link trying to shoot floating barrels in the sea with a cannon. Both these minigames are solid on their own, and entertaining enough to make it on the list as is. However, the reason I mushed them together was because of the guy who runs them. Salvatore may look bored when you first see him, but don't be fooled. When you start the minigame, Salvatore pulls up a cardboard cutout and creates a whole story for the minigame, complete with impressions of characters in the game, including Tetra herself. He also decides to throw in his own special sound effects for the Sinking Ships game. As a person who also likes to make their own sound effects, I can respect Salvatore for the high quality sound effects he's able to come up with. I'm technically cheating with this one, but come on, you gotta love Salvatore. Saving the world can be quite stressful, and with all that weight on Link's shoulders, it makes sense that he'd want to take a break. And there's pretty much nothing more relaxing than fishing. I feel like I'm breaking all sorts of rules here by putting this on the list. I don't even know if fishing could be considered a minigame, and I'm not even picking just one version of the fishing, I'm choosing them all. There's just nothing quite like casting your rod under the sunset when you're supposed to be saving the world from imminent doom. There isn't a whole lot of depth to the fishing in any of the games except for Majora's Mask 3D, but they don't really need to be complex. What more could you possibly need? It's fishing. You cast your rod, you wait for a bite, and you reel in. It's as simple as that. I do really like how they changed it up in Majora's Mask 3D, but the simple fishing of times past is still one of the most relaxing things to do in any 3D Zelda game. The bow is the one item in every Zelda game that I look forward to getting more than any other. I've always loved archery, and I usually pick the ranger class in fantasy games. I love the skill behind archery, and I love how it's implemented into the Zelda games. I mean, sniping a Keese with an arrow is such a satisfying feeling, especially if it was the first arrow released. And along with the bow, we always get a target shooting minigame, sometimes several of them. And as with fishing, I'm including them all into one tasty little spot. These minigames can either be laughably easy or the hardest dang things to accomplish in the game. I can't tell you the amount of time I spent trying to complete the Octorok shooting gallery in Majora's Mask, but I beat it first try in Majora's Mask 3D. It really shows you how good controls can affect the difficulty of a game. I absolutely love testing my archer abilities, and there's no better place than the shooting galleries. My personal favorite is the swamp shooting gallery in Majora's Mask. I just really like how the setup is similar to that of an old retro arcade shooting game. It's a nice touch. In Twilight Princess, there's a cave within the Gerudo Desert. A cave with more terrors than any regular dungeon in the game. I'm not really sure if it counts as a minigame, but the Cave of Ordeals is a 50-floor sub-dungeon teeming with all manners of enemies. From bokoblins to freezards to darknuts, you're sure to find just about every baddie in this cave. They might even be paired in different ways than you're used to. The goal of the cave is to get to the 50th floor without getting a game over. You can bring whatever you want in the dungeon, including fairies, but be guaranteed that the cave knows this and it's gonna throw everything it can at you. So you're going to need every bottle, every fairy, and every move you've learned if you want to make it out alive. If you've played Wind Waker, you might recognize this as being similar to the Savage Labyrinth. I really like both of these dungeons, but I prefer the Cave of Ordeals just a tad bit more. I think that the enemies in Twilight Princess are more varied, and the darker look of Twilight Princess makes the dungeon feel just much more intimidating. It also gets super hard near the end of the dungeon because Darknuts are way harder to take out in Twilight Princess than they are in Wind Waker. And for some reason, the cave wants to throw 3 of them at you in the same room. Another great thing about the Cave of Ordeals is that on every 10th floor, you get a bit of a break because instead of enemies, there's a fairy fountain. We don't really see the Great Fairies all that much in Twilight Princess, which is a shame because Twilight Princess has my favorite form of the Great Fairy because, you know, reasons. So much of 3D Zelda games is focused on combat, and one of the best ways to test your skills is with hordes of enemies. The Cave of Ordeals has just about every enemy in the game, and if you really want to test yourself, you can always do it a second time because the cave has a hard mode difficulty, which is essentially just putting more enemies into every room. And if you do get to the 50th floor a second time, you'll find the Postman. Man, he really will go to any lengths just to do his job. Talk about dedication. As you can tell from the previous entry, I like fighting enemies in Zelda. I enjoy slicing and dicing my way through the forces of evil. So, how can it be possible to get better than a gauntlet of enemies? Make it a gauntlet of bosses. Say what you will about Skyward Sword, but you can't deny that the lightning round is a wonderful way to bring together some of the best moments in the game. The goal of this minigame is simple: fight one boss right after another until you beat them all, die, or you quit early. The difference here is that you can't bring the adventure pouch. That's right, no fairies, heart medallions, or potions in this gauntlet. You are stuck with whatever shield and amount of hearts you happen to have at the time. You're also limited to whatever items you would have had the first time you fought the boss, so no sequence breaking. The only exception to this is the Master Sword. After each round, you can choose to quit and take a reward, or you can continue on to fight for better rewards. Most of these rewards are either rupees or something pointless like treasures, but after the 4th round you can get a piece of heart, and after the 8th round you can get a Hylian shield. That's right, the Hylian shield. It was hidden by this overgrown yellow-bellied lizard this whole time. The Hylian shield is by far the best shield in the game, as it can take both fire and electric attacks, and it can't break. Ever. It also looks really satisfying, and it finally completes that classic legendary hero look that's been missing for most of the game. While some of the bosses in Skyward Sword suck, like the Imprison fights, there are some other really good quality ones like the Koloktos and any of the later Girahim fights. The lightning round is the ultimate test of skill, as it encourages you to beat your time on each boss fight without taking too much damage because your hearts carry over between rounds. I really think that it hits that sweet spot of being hard, but not frustrating. It's doable, but you'll have to work for it. However, if you are looking for more of a challenge, you can always come back on Hero Mode, where enemies do double damage and heart drops are non-existent. This mode really pushes your limits, and it's one of the best challenges you can get from a Zelda game. It also happens to throw the final boss of the game into the mix, and he's one of the hardest fights. And if that isn't enough for you, you can always skip any heart pieces or containers and try it with 6 hearts. I have yet to do it, but it is on my to-do list. Minigames bring out the best and the worst of Zelda games. They showcase just how fluid or frustratingly detrimental controls can be. They can be a relaxing change of pace, a final test of skills, or just a fun like carnival game. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go grab some cotton candy.